chance, stuck in my head, not gonna leave it at that. Taking the lead, feeling your heat, just wanna give you my best. I don't even know your name, but you got me, 'cause you're on to die. We don't know what happens next, but you got me, 'cause I'm next in line. You make it look so easy, making me feel so dreamy. Not the one who pays for drinks, but you got me, 'cause you're on to that. Got me locked in now. Go ahead and take a shot. Do you really want me? Maybe you're just playing. The way you're making it move, yeah, you do it so smooth. Make it all about you. Can have it all if you want. Taking the chance, stuck in my head, not gonna leave it at that. Taking the lead, feeling your heat, just wanna give you my best. Taking the chance, stuck in my head.
Welcome to the Meta Behind Relationships. I'm your host, Gaylon McDowell, and this podcast is a format that allows us to discuss relationship issues at a deeper level, at a deeper soul level, at a level where we're thinking about how the mind works, at the many layers of the mind, how thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and ideas become experiences, and what we can learn from relationships. If we look at life as a mirror, if we look at life as a school, if we look at life as a process of creation. And through these conversations, my goal is to help you bridge the gap from what you say you want to what you are actually experiencing. So today, again, with the Meta Behind Relationships, we're going to be talking about what do you really want? Are you really clear about what you want in a relationship? Now, today, we're going to have, again, because we're just having a great time, I'm bringing the creator and founder of the 5S to Love platform back on to the podcast so we can have a discussion around it. So, Christine, are you there?
Hey, Gaylon, how are you?
I'm excellent. How about yourself?
I think it's great you have me back every week. I told you this is like my own counseling session. So everyone, welcome. That's what I feel like, because I never try to act like I'm an expert. You're the expert. And, when I have questions, I talk to you about it. So it's great that we can continue to have this conversation. It feels like we're in the same room together. And we're talking through what our thoughts are. So I'm excited about it, especially today's topic.
All right. So yet again, I want to make sure that people who do want to ask me questions that I can address during the show, that you send them to Christine. You can put them in the comment sections of the Facebook page or the YouTube page, and I will address them. If you have questions, even if I'm not covering that topic during a particular show, I can take a part of a podcast segment of time to just deal with questions. These are questions from, Brian from South Dakota or Lisa from Florida, just to make sure that we have an opportunity to take care of the needs of our people. Again, this is a strictly metaphysical approach to relationships. So it can sometimes cut, but it's not cutting to hurt you. It's cutting to enlighten you so you can empower yourself to take right action. All right. So what do you have for me today, Christine?
Well, we're talking about relationships. So what I wanted to ask is, why do you think people are unsure about what they want in a relationship? Why do you think people feel that way or approach things a certain way?
I think most people are unsure about what they want in life in general. I think people pretty much unconsciously coast. They watch as children, we grow up and we watch our adults around us. And most people who do
Mhm.
brain science will tell you that the majority of the input of the brain happens by age 7. So we're watching people coast, we're watching people live unfulfilled lives, we're watching people go through the motions of just getting up, going to work, dealing with the bills, dealing with whatever, but not necessarily creating passion, desire, clear goals, the attainment of goals. And when you're not watching people seek their heart's desires or to create a life that not only benefits them but others in ways that's understandable at a young age, because it could be
Mhm.
done but not necessarily always communicated well. This is how
Mhm.
you create goals. This is what we're going to do. This is why we're going to do it. What ends up happening is we end up in a process to where that level of critical thinking is not necessarily developed. That's one. Two, the reason why people have problems not knowing what they want in relationships is real simple. Um, they haven't gotten to the space to where they know what they don't want. So I often tell my students and clients that you can't control who you're attracted to, but you can control what you do with that attraction. That's key,
Like that. I like that.
because attraction has several factors of why you're particularly
Right.
attracted to a particular individual or a particular
Mhm.
type. It's a lot of factors in that, and maybe we'll do a future show where we just unwrap that process by itself.
That would be great.
So when people are not necessarily self-aware, what ends
Mhm.
up happening is they don't ever get to the space where they start to really sit down and think it through. What is it that I like in a man? What is it that I like in a woman? What is it that I want in a partner? Is it that I want in a spouse? Really sit down and think about what it is that you want outside of the context of it having to model absolutely in all factors what your parents or grandparents or aunts and uncles or siblings or cousins went through or friends. But what is it that you really want? And
Right.
then once you have that level of clarity, then going forward. I used to joke with years ago with some of my students, and this is more of a religious joke. But when I was sitting, ask people, okay, what is it you want to demonstrate in your life? What is it that you want to
Mhm.
demonstrate in your life? And I would get all of these whole hum, whatever, not sure conversations. And I would say, if Jesus rematerialized and sat next to you right now and said, you have 10 seconds to tell me what you want, could you do it? And see, that's the type of stuff that I'm talking about. So, from a metaphysical standpoint,
Mhm.
I'm a big proponent of a statement from Reverend Knight. You must be definite with the infinite. All right. So, you have to be clear about what it is that you want if you want to experience it in your life. All right. And if you're not clear yet about what it is that you really want, at least get to the space where you understand what you don't want.
Right. And
Okay.
that kind of leads to my next question, because I think a lot of us do this. And my question was, do you think our parents or lack of parenting our family impacts how we understand or manage relationships?
Yes. Yes, relationship issues with parents and how you were raised and what you were exposed to can make a difference, and you have to be very
Okay.
conscious of it. Um, when I was growing up, without getting into great detail, when I was, 'cause some of these people are still alive. When I was growing up, both of sets of my grandparents were married, so
Mhm.
we had that. Um, and my parents, they divorced when I was 1, so I have no memory of them being together. And I
Okay.
think that's a process that you have to figure out. With my grandparents on my mother's side, they were entrepreneurial, they were business owners, they were real estate owners. They moved a certain
Mhm.
kind of way. My dad's side, grandfather worked for Ford for years. My grandmother was kind of in and out, retired, drove the bus and whatever. They had very different type of lifestyles. Trying to figure out, okay, what is the thing that you mimic? But my dad and my uncles and some of my male cousins on my dad's side, they were players. So you had, so you had to, even when they were married, they were players.
Right.
As I said,
So
I
those
had to
are
be
two
mindful of.
extreme dynamics.
Right. So what ends up happening is, as a male, you're used to seeing this. So
Right.
you have to make some real conscious choices about what it is that you seek to do, because it can affect your relationships. And even when it's unconscious, like, one of my uncles is deceased now. Um, uh, he was like a real pretty boy type,
Okay.
back in the day, the dark skin, curly hair types, that the women would swoon over. And, so I would see him with all these pretty girls. So when I was growing up, I was like, I have to be with pretty women because it was like that would be considered pretty by my uncle's standards.
Right.
Because he was so young. He's only
So
7 years older
so
than me.
you kind of looked at women through his lens
Well,
of
his
what
is one
pretty
of them.
was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was just one of those things. It was like, he was, because he was getting all of these accolades, him and my dad and some of my other uncles. He wasn't the only one. Trust me. They were all, they all gave it they were all swinging for home runs back then. But the problem came into play is that most of the relationships were not harmonious and didn't last.
Okay.
And so you have to learn, okay, what is it that I need to learn? What can I take out of this that's good? I need to pay attention with what doesn't work, and
Hmm.
then be able to create what you want to. So my goal has always been to be in a space to where, excuse this term, but I just have to say it plainly because this is how my 18-year-old brain processed it. Don't wreck a good woman.
Mm,
Because I saw a lot of
I
good
like
women
that.
get wrecked in that
Yeah.
process of them figuring themselves out. And and again, I'm not knocking them. They did what they
Right.
did.
Right.
They did what they did. And
Right.
those women made choices to be with the men that were doing what they were doing. And I'm not talking about beating people up and throwing them upside,
Right.
but the infidelity and some other things that were happening, that just, when it's all said and done, these women ended up, in my opinion, many times worse than they did when they came in. Again, no judgment, no shade,
Right.
by no
But
stretch
it's
of the
just life.
imagination, because I think you can
It's
only
just
be
life.
your level of consciousness.
Exactly.
And if people meet you at that level and they choose to engage and they can see all the red flags, and because they can't get past, what I used to tell my uncles and dad when I was a little kid, that they were like DeBarge but masculine. So I used to literally say that to them,
Right.
because when in the early
Right.
80s, mid 80s, the women loved the bars, but they
They
were
love
all
the barge.
feminine looking guys, in my opinion.
Yes. Elder
And there's
barge.
nothing wrong with that. It was just like, okay, you
Yeah.
guys look, some of them look like women, but that was the thing back then, the long hair
Yeah.
and the clothes
And the
and the
high
whatever.
pitched voices
Yeah. So I was like, you all are like the rough version of DeBarge.
of the
Uh,
barges. And by the way, I just want to say DeBarge is from Michigan, so I'm not taking offense to that, Chicago.
yeah. And I
But all
love
right.
DeBarge, by the way. I actually went to see El DeBarge sing last year. He was at a concert with Brian McKnight and several other people.
Yeah,
And,
Elle still
ex-
sings, and Chico is doing some things too. So very
yeah.
interesting.
I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah. And I love Switch and all of that stuff. So I'm a big DeBarge fan in general.
Look at
But
you.
anyway, let's get back to what
Okay.
people want. So my point is, when you
Yeah.
start dealing with parental things, you have to recognize that patterns have been put in front of you
Okay.
unconsciously that you see. And it affects, I only shared that one example, and I have tons of, when I was growing up, examples of men and women dynamics, um, that it affects your ability to rationally think about a process. Like, okay, this is what's in front
Wow.
of me, but this is my paradigm. That's why I
Right.
taught paradigm so strongly last week, because people
Right.
don't realize that they've lived into culture, tradition, um, um, uh, you know, media, what they see on TV, now on the internet, and
Right.
et cetera. It's so many things that affects how we deal with people, and sometimes we come up with these um, um, surface wants without really getting clear about what is it that we really want in a
Yeah.
relationship, and uh, recognizing that everything has its own trade-off. Somebody's like, I want Some lady, I want the guy that's making, millions of dollars a year, but he's working 100 hours a week and he's not home,
In order
and
to
you're
do
raising
that.
kids by yourself, and he's always
Right.
on the road or whatever, or he's coming home from the office at 9, 10 o'clock every night. But it's one thing to say, I want this, but you have to be clearer. I want this type of experience, but I also want this, and this. Finding the ability to have trade-off makes a difference. Like Jack Canfield said, and I think this is beautiful. And this had to happen to a few wives because he's had a few. And there's no shade on that either, because why stay in something that doesn't work?
Right.
That's my belief, and and I've been married before. I get that completely. The issue is he got to the place where he was coming home late consistently. His wife wanted Jack Canfield experience, whatever that means as a marriage. And she just had to get to a point of, on these days, can you be home from work by this time so we can sit down and eat dinner together? That became a bottom line that he had to adjust around. So she got clear about what she wanted. Okay, I'm living in this big house. I'm assuming Jack Canfield's house is decent. I think we can both agree on that.
Oh yeah, we can both agree.
In a decent area. I'm sure she didn't lack for anything.
She didn't lack for anything.
Okay.
But him.
But his time.
Yes.
So what she had to figure out was, look, we have to get. She was basically saying, as a wife, I desire to have dinner with my husband. Now, out of all the stuff you do, how often can you make that work? I think that's beautiful, because she got clear about.
What it is she wanted.
Right. And then you don't know, maybe her family sat down for dinner and ate every evening. That might be something that was important
for her. That's like a traditional thing.
He doesn't say if that was what she did or did in the book.
But normally people don't. It's their practice, it's the subconscious practicing of what you've experienced. That plays out in relationships.
So like for me, one of the things that's important for me is when my mother passed away in 2010, and we always, as a family, we always ate together, Christmas, Thanksgiving, things of that nature. So my oldest sister and I, my mother had 2 children, I have many siblings on my father's side. We have to see each other's faces on Thanksgiving and Christmas. So so to be with me, that's an understanding, because that's something that clearly matters to me enough that with our mother gone, and it's just me, our bloodline is me, my sister, and my daughter, because my mother was the only child. My sister has no children, and I had 1 child. So for me, just keeping that together is something that I clearly want.
And it's important.
And because of my parenthood, this was something we did. It made a difference. I mean, it can affect things like, and I try not to talk about it, but like, for instance,
well, let me tell you what, Gaylon, before you talk about it, we have to do a quick commercial break, because I don't want anybody to miss it. Folks, this first commercial is very important, that we really talk to our Black men about getting tested for prostate cancer. So be sure when you watch this podcast that you share, because it's important that we support our Black men. We do love them. We'll be right back after this first commercial break.
We know what you made of. I do better offline. Yeah. I've been calling to a guy. I'm in tune with the signs. I'm just trying to let go. I'm just trying to be me. I'm just trying to do Moon landed with the elevation. Armstrong with the levitation. My third eye needed calibration. I was heat rock when I notated. I've been going crazy. Stone face when I kill beat. Leaving no trace on location. Premeditated. Hey.
Get it that I'm never going back. Get it that I'm never going back. I get to it first, I got you mad. I guess that when I get to it last. Get it that I'm never going back. Get it that I'm never going back. Going up, going up, going up, going up, going up, going up. Get it that I'm never going up, going up.
No, yeah. He doesn't mind at all. He want my juice like that. He does whatever, what it feels for nobody but himself. No, yeah. Pull myself together to not give myself the pressure. I don't know what to do with So what's standing in our way? When you're out of my league, I feel insecure, but I hope this is real, yeah. He doesn't mind at all, he want my juice like a. He does whatever while he feels for nobody but himself, no, yeah. He doesn't mind at all, he want my juice like a. He does whatever while he feels for nobody but himself, no, yeah.
So Gaylon, when we left off, and guys, welcome back. Just to let you know, this is a pre-recorded session. We would love to hear from you. Please leave all of your comments for us on any of the social media sites that you follow us on. And Gaylon's going to build in a segment to his pre-recorded sessions to answer those questions for you. We want to make sure that we're supporting relationships and any questions that you need. And of course, I know you're butting in on my session, so I'm going to allow you guys to do that. But when you left out, Gaylon, we were talking about, how important it is for your family to get together for holidays, for Thanksgiving and Christmas, like face to face, have dinner. And for some people, like maybe somebody like me who doesn't have a family, it's just me and my son. So I don't have like a big family. I could be thinking I want to go to Cancun
Yeah.
for Christmas. And you're like, no, we're doing this dinner. So people need to understand like what you were saying as it relates to that. And then we're going to talk about how you feel education impacts that.
Yeah. But let me just make a quick statement based upon that commercial for the guys getting checked for the prostate stuff.
Oh, sure.
Guys, I would just say this really simply. Go yearly, get your blood work, get your urine work done. You'll catch a lot of stuff early before it becomes a problem. Ignorance is not bliss. And what you don't know can't hurt you. So, I've had to work with people through various illnesses through their in their lives through ministry. I've been working in ministry since the mid 90s. And, I started very young. And I've had to deal with people with tests and ICUs and emergency rooms and things of that nature. Some things were very preventable. And, and when, even if it wasn't, once we discovered what it was, not only could we do the medical work, but we could put the prayer work towards it. Now, whatever your concept of prayer is, you have a right to. I'm a big believer that if we can reach a certain level of spiritual awareness, that prayer can impact your body. I believe that wholeheartedly. Matter of fact, I believe your body believes every word you say, every thought you think, every feeling you feel. That's my personal belief. And if you know what you need to be focusing on, now you can put the power of your own intention, spiritually, mentally, and physically, toward your healing versus being in ignorance and then getting to a place to where it's difficult to make that lift. I compare people who are going through serious situations in their lives and then they expect, God to swoop in to help them. It's sort of like a person walking into a gym and saying, put 500 pounds on the rack and I'm gonna bench press it. That's what we want to do with our faith. We haven't been utilizing it. We haven't been focusing it. We haven't been culturing it. And then we want to lift a 500-pound problem with our pee-wee faith.
Pee-wee faith.
Yeah. All right.
I love that.
So stay spiritually connected. And go do what you need to do medically because it can make all the difference in the world. And you're talking to someone who at age 20 was 10 minutes away from dying from a severe asthma attack. And it was medical science that gave me an opportunity to learn metaphysics, to learn New Thought metaphysics, these spiritual principles and universal laws that gave me an opportunity to heal myself. Without medical science, I wouldn't be here to have that conversation. So I'm pro spirituality and pro medicine. To me, they should work together. They should not be in conflict.
I like that. Thank you, Gaylon. Appreciate that.
Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, so Gaylon, listen, I've been in education. I've worked in education. I was the CIO of one of the largest school districts here in Michigan. And I was a chemistry teacher before that and a biology teacher. So my thing is, the question to you is, do you think that our education system plays a role in preparing us for personal professional relationships.
Yes, I think it plays a role in it, and I think the role is negative. The reason
Wow.
is our educational system doesn't give us the opportunity to develop, doesn't teach us life skills. I realize that teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic is a lot. It takes up a
Right.
lot of time. Unfortunately, what people need outside of reading, writing, and arithmetic, outside of whatever particular skill they go to college for or
Right.
they go to a trade school for, is good communication skills. People need, emotional intelligence, relationship awareness, and financial intelligence. You see, I gave you those things. I emailed you. These are some topics I want to talk about. I see that you have them up there. Now, what do I mean by that? Good communication skills. So, what school does is at a baseline level teaches you basically
Yeah.
how to stay quiet so you can learn. So that's good. All right.
Yeah.
So that structure is good, but that's not necessarily good communication skills. Communication is a skill, the ability
Okay.
to communicate your ideas. Some schools will have things like debate teams and things of that nature. So the
Right.
people in that small field or group will
Right.
learn these techniques. But in general, they're not taught to the general populace of schools. And we
Agreed.
all know that it's easier to learn a thing as a child.
It
So the
is.
fact that we're not teaching good communication skills and they're not learning it from home means, where do they learn it? Two,
Right.
emotional intelligence. We're
Right.
dealing with situations where we have resources for all type of stuff, military bombs, this money to give to other countries to do all type of stuff. And I'm not here to get into a political conversation around that.
Right.
But then you'll have schools that don't have enough counselors to help the
Yeah.
children deal with their issues. We have children that are coming from broken homes, abused homes, single parent situations
Yeah.
with stress, uh, uh, kids that go home, they leave home, mama's gone because she has to work 2-3 jobs to get home.
Yes.
Mama's not home because they're working 2 or 3 jobs. You
Yes.
have people that are dealing with the stress of sometimes living in horrific neighborhoods. All type of
Mhm.
things are going on. Things that are being impressed on them because of social media now.
Yes.
Social media is a wonderful thing, but it can also have a negative effect on the brain
Correct.
if not monitored, especially the young mind.
Mhm.
So if emotional intelligence, and when I say emotional intelligence, I'm not talking about, just teach people how to not be angry. That's a part of it. Emotional intelligence is the ability to connect with people
Yes.
and the ability not only to process your own emotions, but to see what's actually happening with people when they're experiencing something or going through their own emotional stuff. So people with high emotional intelligence normally have a great ability to connect with other human beings. All right. And here's, one of the things I used to always tell my daughter when she was a little kid was, when people like you and they'll support you, if people like you, they'll stand with
Mhm.
you.
Yeah.
They'll look out for you. They'll protect you because there's a connection.
Right.
All right. Then we start talking about relationship awareness. Relationship awareness to me is simply meaning that you don't function as a dense human being in your relationship. And things can be happening and people are not paying attention to how their behavior is affecting
Mhm.
another person, or what's actually happening with that person that allows them to make sure that that person's needs are being met in the relationship,
Mhm.
or they're not being triggered because it's really not the right time. For instance, walking in the door and your spouse is right on you. Like guys normally, for instance, from a male perspective, need some level of decompression time before they start dealing with life after work.
Yes.
They walk in and the laundry list starts coming out. I need this. We need to talk about this. We need to address this, whatever. Like,
Not.
can I get my coat off? Can I put my hat off? Take my hat off? Can I just breathe here for a second and watch some, maybe an hour worth of mindless TV, and then my
Right.
mind will reboot.
In
Dr. Phil,
transition.
right. Dr. Phil used to say when he was in a practicing psychologist that
Mhm.
before he went home, he would go play tennis. It was his way to shake what he needed to shake off of him
Before he
before
walked
he
in the
went
door.
home, because he knew
Yeah.
that he needed some time to himself to detach. And that's one of the things that's relationship awareness. What's
Right.
needed in this moment? Do I need to be supportive? Do I need to be protective? Do I need to be loving? Do I need to be compassionate? Do I need to be understanding? Do I need to watch what I'm saying right now, because this is just a sensitive moment?
Sensitive.
Relationship awareness is not necessarily taught well, um, because it's not modeled well by people's parents and family members and friends. It's not modeled well on TV, in movies, and on social media. And if they're not getting it from school, which I think it should be a part of the curriculum, then
Okay.
where are they going to get it from? The last thing is financial intelligence. The school system is created to make drones. There's no
Mm-hmm.
other way to say it.
It's a
So
production line.
it's created to make drones.
Mm-hmm.
Financial intelligence not being taught in school, in my opinion, is criminal.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you become a functioning adult in society, as Robert Kiyosaki says, that the bank never asks to see your report card. Okay, so your financial statement is your report card
Mm-hmm.
in the financial world. All right, now you want
Right.
to hook up with somebody else, and you have poor spending habits. You want to wear everything on your back. Money burns your hand as soon as it gets in your hand. Or you might be at the other extreme where you don't want to spend or enjoy any of your money.
Right.
Almost like the Grinch. You're like, oh, I got this, but I can't enjoy it at all. Don't know how to make money goals. Don't know how to create money plans. Don't know how to do any of the budget and things that's necessary for a relationship to work, because everybody who does marriage counselors, whether they're a minister like
Mm-hmm.
me or people who work in the marriage counseling therapy business, know that money is the number one issue for arguments and divorce in the United States.
So,
Money issues,
Gaylon,
yes.
I'm sorry. So, what do you say when they so they do have a class, and you're right, everybody doesn't, it's an elective. So business or finance management is taught, but it's an elective. It's like the debate class. It's not a requirement for everyone.
But
So
that's
like you
college
said,
level. But that's college level. It's not,
no,
most schools are not high school level.
well, high school level they do, but not, and again, curriculum is based on choice. So you're right. So to your point, you're right. Education could make a greater impact if that was a required course
Yeah.
instead of an elective. And
What I'm
then you don't,
saying,
by the way, you don't get to those debate or elective courses until your 10th or 11th or 12th grade year, right?
right.
So at this point, if you've learned bad behavior up until 11th grade, now that teacher, that little one semester course is not going to correct that for you,
Correct.
right? 'Cause now it's late. So to your point, I agree with you, especially being in education for some time. You're right. We need to start off at elementary, middle school talking about finances, checking accounts. How do you set up a household budget? Bills. Because I think too, kids would stop asking for these expensive things in elementary, middle school, and high school if they knew my mom has a budget.
Yeah.
See, my son is a single parent and he went to private school. My son used to think like it was a money tree out there. He would just come home and be like, Mom, can I get this? And I would be like, dude, I got mortgage to pay, car note, car insurance. He was looking at me like, what does that have to do with me?
Mm-hmm.
It was like no impact on him. So I had to sit him down at an early age and I gave him his allowance. And I said, out of your allowance, you're going to be responsible for paying $1 towards every bill. And any money you have left, you still have to keep $5 in your savings account, which is a deposit. And you still have to have your spending money for the movies when we go. Well, when I started deducting that money from his allowance, which was $1 towards every bill, he was like, I remember saying, I don't have any money left. I said, exactly. So now what do you think you need to do? Right. So you're right. If it's not being taught at school, do you think parents have a responsibility to
It's the
start
parents'
teaching that?
responsibility, but how many parents really have good money intelligence, financial intelligence,
That's
and more
true.
importantly, financial practices? Because here's the thing: a lot of people know what they need to do, but they don't do it. I always tell people, stop playing. You know what you need to be doing. If you want to build wealth, you have to spend less than you make.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first step.
Step number one.
All right. If you want to lose weight, you have to eat less and exercise. Let's stop
Eat less.
playing.
Stop
Okay.
playing.
Now, people can know at a baseline that's what they need to do, but people make emotional decisions. That's why having emotional intelligence. So when the person who knows they don't need to go shopping when they get their check and blow their check and then want
Right.
to make their problem somebody else's problem because they bought what they wanted and didn't handle what they needed to handle, their responsibilities. Right. Now it's a problem for everyone else. So that's what I'm talking about. And that creates financial problems because I grew up seeing ladies sneaking boots in so their husbands wouldn't see them.
That's the biggest thing. My girlfriends are like, honey, I got to put this stuff in my trunk. And then I'll sneak it in later. And I'm going to tell you guys that does have an impact in your relationship. We have to go for a quick commercial break. When we get back, Gaylon's going to continue to go through the steps of what you guys need to do when you don't see positive relationships or positive things in your life that's impacting your relationship. And finances is one of them. So we're going to continue this conversation on finance because, honey, a lot of y'all putting stuff in y'all trunk and y'all need to stop that because you overspend it. And them credit card bills are high. And that is an argument and a discussion. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
We know what you made of. I do better offline. Yeah. I've been calling to a guy. I'm in tune with the signs. I'm just trying to let go. I'm just trying to be me. I'm just trying to do fine. Moon landed with the elevation. Armstrong with the levitation. My third eye needed calibration. I was heat rock when I notated. I've been going crazy. Stone face when I kill beat, leaving no trace on location. Premeditated, ayy.
And you'll never find a place in my arms. Hey, show me love, 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 show me love. I'm not asking you for much, just give me something to feel. Show me love, show me love, show me love. Call me up if you feel a little lonely. I wanna spend some more time with you. I'm anxious to know what you feel for me now. Just give me something, yeah. I can't taste it with your lips on mine. That you don't love me like you did that night. I'm so nervous that you'll never feel the same and you'll
Hey guys, welcome back. Just to remind you, this is a pre-recorded session. We would love to hear from you, so please leave your comments on any social media sites that you're viewing this podcast. And Gaylon will be getting back to you. We're going to build in a segment at the end of every podcast for him to respond to any questions that you leave on any of our social media sites. So Gaylon, we left off, just to let you guys know, one of the things that I put in my capability app, the compatibility app asked that question. It helps you rate what's important to you. And one of the F's is finance. And one of the questions that I have in a card game, which is just a question, it just kind of lets you know what the mindset of the person is without you really asking a lot of questions that a person may be offended about. But it's like, if you had an extra $500, what would you do with it? Mm-hmm. That's a question to ask someone. Because if the woman says, oh, I would go buy me a pair of red bottoms, then you would say you would spend a whole $500 on one item. What does that tell you about that person? Because if it was me, I would say, well, I would take $100 and do something special and put the other $400 in the bank. Because it's extra. That means we can extra closer to one of our goals. But I would definitely take the $100 and say, you want to go to that new fancy restaurant? We can probably splurge on that this week because that's a great idea to try something new and go out on a date, or if you're by yourself. So, with you've talked about this with couples. And I don't think people understand, if you don't learn how to manage your money early on, you grow up as an adult still overspending. Yes.
One of the things that I told one of my best friends a few years ago was the teenage versions of us would pray for the guys that make the money we make now. As even when we show up as, okay, I'm still working on trying to get this together and adding responsibilities because, I have a lot of responsibilities. He has a lot of responsibilities. But when we were utility clerks pushing carts at the grocery store as teenagers, making $4.20 an hour. Yeah, that was a long time ago. Unfortunately, there's some states in the United States that that still use the federal minimum wage of $7 or something. That's criminal, by the way, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, a teenager's making $4.20 an hour. If we would have said to ourselves, when you reach these certain ages, you'll be making this money, we'd be like, we made it. But what ends up happening is we fell into the same traps that many of our peers and predecessors did.
Mm-hmm.
As our income raised, we just took on more stuff.
Yep.
Without structuring it in a way of saying, okay, I made this more. Now I'm like, okay, well, I can pay 200, 300 more on a car note now. I made this much more. I can take this much more on vacation. I can make this much more on my clothes. I can make, instead of getting, 2 or 3 pair of Air Jordans a year, now I'm getting 8 pair, whatever, whatever that thing is for you.
Right.
And what ends up happening is, I'm just gonna get the bigger house. I'm not saying I'm all for bigger and better, but I'm for bigger and better with a plan.
With a plan.
Because when you start talking about relationships, dealing with another person and their money habits, what you'll discover is it can create extreme frustration, especially if you're a person who wants to have some level of structure and your spouse is running up credit card debt, spending.
That's a lot of conversation.
Whatever. It creates its own problem. And as you look back in life, I said to a buddy of mine a couple of years ago, and I'm working on, my goal is one of my financial goals is to be a multimillionaire at the age where I can still enjoy it.
Exactly. You and I are on the same page.
But I remember walking into a bookstore and buying a book. It was Dave Ramsey's original version of Total Money Makeover. And I laugh and joke with myself now because I'm not going to beat myself up. So when that book first came out, that was late 90s?
Yep.
Around 2000 or whatever, somewhere around that time. I said, if I'd have just did this, nothing else. I'm not saying Dave Ramsey's plan was the all in all,
right?
But it was a plan.
But it was a plan.
Okay, just do this one thing. Where would I be now? At that stage of my life, but at that stage, I was still like the next promotion, the next bigger thing, the next promotion, the next bigger thing. So what ends up happening is when you start doing next promotion, the next bigger thing, you don't necessarily have guiding principles that allow you to deal with your money with integrity. Yep. That's a real challenge with relationships. So what ends up happening is, you go in for one car and then the salesman says, well, this is the upgrade that
upsells you
10,000 more, but it's not really 10,000 more because when they put the interest on top of it and the years and the payments, now it's that like 10,000 is another $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 on top of it. All of those things add up, so I'm just saying that from the standpoint, if you want a healthy relationship, you got to get the money thing right. You got to get the situational awareness, relationship awareness right. You got to get the emotional awareness right. You got to be able to communicate in a way that is agreed upon for the health of the marriage or the relationship. If not, what will end up happening is people will start filling the gaps in with the lack of information. And what I mean by that is this. If you have A and C, but you don't have B, rational thinking never fills in B. Imagination fills in B. And imagination can be built on fears. It can be built on your old past context, paradigm, old relationships, all family dynamics, upbringing, and that missing information now turns into an opportunity to wreck your relationship.
Which is, you know what, Gaylon, that was my number 2 question I wanted to ask you, which is, what would you recommend to someone who lacks experience of positive relationships so they struggle with shifting their mindset to see the positive?
So first thing I would say to those people would be, get clear about what you don't want.
Okay.
That's the first thing, because a lot of times people don't get to what they want. Okay, get clear. These are things that don't work for me. Get to your real non-negotiable, unalterable terms, your bottom lines.
Okay.
Get clear about that. Then start looking at the relationships. If you know any healthy relationships, even if it's a healthy relationship, the only healthy relationship you saw was the Cosby Show growing up.
I know.
Look for the qualities that you admired
Yes.
Okay. And what does that mean to you?
Mhm.
What is it that you feel as though you need to have to make this relationship work? I like to tell people to use the SMART goals. You know, people teach this in business, but it
Mhm.
works with
Yes.
everything. What is SMART? For those who aren't sure, SMART is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-based. I'm gonna say it again: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-based. Now, let's say you're in a relationship or you want to be in a relationship. You got to be very specific about what it is that you want, what you want to experience, what you don't want to experience. Be as specific as possible. This is not the ultimate 120-page checklist, because that becomes
Right.
unattainable jargon for the brain. There's no other way for
Mhm.
me to say that.
Mhm.
So get specific, then measurable. How do you measure? So I want somebody to love me. Okay. How do you measure how somebody loves you? For some people, measuring is if you use like the 5 languages for love context. Some people want affirmations. They want to be
Right.
words of affirmation. Some people want gifts. Some people want people to do things for them. So, you know, keeping the house clean and cooking and things of that nature is their way of showing love or experiencing love. You have to know what it is that you like in that process and what your
Right.
other person likes. Okay.
Mhm.
So you need to make sure you're clear about their specifics. You need to understand, how do you measure I'm being loved in this relationship, I'm being honored in this relationship, I'm being communicated properly in this relationship, I am I'm being supported in this relationship.
Mhm.
It has to be measurable. It can't be hypothetical. It can't be living in the ether somewhere. What does it look
Right.
like in real time?
So when you say measurable, and I'm a person who lacks positive experiences, give me an example of how I would measure if I'm being loved. Like, what is some of the things that I can put on my list to make sure? Because I don't have any positive
Okay,
experiences.
so for instance, um, quality time might be a thing that measure is a
Okay.
measurable for you. So quality time might mean, look, we all have lives and things of that nature and outside things we like to do. But
Mhm.
we have to have a certain amount of days per week to where we're together. We have intimacy time, whether that's sex or just holding each other in the bed and watching TV and talking, or watching the movie together, or doing activities together. That
Okay.
quality time. So even though you might not have had the positive experience before, you know that quality time is something that you desire and need.
Right.
That I call it touchy feely. Like some people
Okay.
are really touchy feely. They got to be able to touch
Mhm.
their loved one. They need to be able to caress. They need to be able to hug. They need to be able to kiss. Some people in a relationship is like, I pay all the bills, or don't you see me cooking this food? Don't you see me taking care of these children? Don't you see me keeping this house clean? Don't you see me out here mowing this grass? And they think, yes, all of those things are
Right.
aspects of love, but that's not what
Right.
that person needs.
Needs.
So this is why I always start with people being self-aware. So even if
Mhm.
you haven't had positive examples, when you start doing the
Right.
work of getting clear about being self-aware about what it is that you want, then it's your responsibility to communicate it. One of the things that I've noticed in years of marriage counseling is that people don't communicate what they want. They expect their spouse or significant other to be psychic, to be telepathic.
Right.
They should just know because they love me. No, they shouldn't know.
They
It's
don't
your
know
job to
you.
communicate to
It's
them what it is that you desire. So that would be just one way
yeah.
of explaining it. Now, the A in SMART for SMART goals is attainable. Okay.
Okay.
And you know, if you're not dating somebody,
Mhm.
attainable would be something like this. A guy comes up to me and says, "Hey, Rev, I want you to pray with me about getting a healthy relationship. I really want to date Beyonce." Now, is it in the realm of the universe? Is it impossible? No. But is it improbable? Yes. Okay.
Beyonce.
It's improbable. Okay. So your brain
Oh
has to
my.
believe that this is attainable. So when you start talking about the things you want in a relationship,
Right.
you have to believe that it's attainable. Because if you
Right.
can't believe that it's attainable, what it end up happening is if you don't believe that you can reasonably accomplish a thing at by a certain time, you will give up hope. You'll become resigned. And resignation is horrible for a relationship, and resignation is exceptionally horrible before you get into a relationship because you won't even attempt it. All right. So it has to make sense to you at some level, even if it's a stretch. All right. It has to be attainable in your own mind. If I just said tomorrow, I want to be an astronaut for NASA and I want to go into the space station by next year. I haven't been trained to be an astronaut. I don't know how to fly anything. I don't have degrees in the science and astrophysics and all this other stuff you need to have to even have that conversation. So is it outside the realm of possibility? No. But is it implausible? Yes. Okay.
That's very much implausible.
Right.
And
it's
people
fairy tale thinking.
Yeah. Just like, I mean, to me, I would have been like, do you mean Beyonce who live in Chicago or Beyonce? Because if it's Beyonce who on the other side of Chicago, on the south side of Chicago, that's looking pretty good.
Right. And here's the thing. I don't want to sound, because I'm such an inspirational person, you say at least, that I don't want to sound like I'm being hard when what I'm about to say has to be stated as attainable. Sometimes you just have to ask the hard questions like, okay, for what I'm going after, what am I bringing to the table that'll make that person be attracted to me, want to date me, want to marry me? Not what you think they want, what they want.
What they want.
Okay. So if you're not clear about what that looks like, you can be delusional in a relationship or seeking relationships because you're like, I should be here versus there. Now, one of the things I tell, again, students, not sometimes clients, but I'll tell a student this in a heartbeat. Most people think they're at a higher level of consciousness, of awareness, of skill, of expertise than they actually are. I call it the American Idol effect. People go on American Idol every year.
Really?
And they can't sing. And nobody that loves them enough will tell them that they can't sing. Okay. So what ends up happening, and I'm not saying that, hey, don't try to, live outside of your current environment. I'm not telling people don't stretch.
Right.
But sometimes people are stretching to spaces to when they get rejected, they're making it about the other person without realizing, well, maybe it's something about me that is not an energetic match for what I'm seeking to date or to marry. I'm just not energetically, lifestyle, language, mentality. Something is off.
Right.
Because I keep trying to play in the big leagues and I keep being told that I need to go back down to the minor leagues. Anyway, next, the R is relevant. All right. What is relevant? Relevant means that your goals should align with your values and your long-term objectives. So when you want to talk about creating a healthy relationship, you have to have long-term objectives. You have to have values that govern and guide your relationship. If you don't, then what you're talking about isn't relevant to the well-being of your relationship. Wow. That's really clear. And then there's T, is time-based. What does that mean? Set realistic but ambitious end dates for your tasks.
Yes.
All right. So if you have a relationship and you say, okay, we want to get a house by this, then that means, okay, you might be stretching, but it also means we got to get this money together. We got to budget it. We got to set this aside. We got to make sure the credit's right. It's several things that got to happen within that time base. I often tell people a statement that Napoleon Hill wrote. I don't remember what book it was, but he wrote, the author of Think and Grow Rich.
I was going to ask you, do you read Think and Grow Rich?
Yeah, I love that book. I've taught it in the Johnny Coleman Institute several times. I love that book. But he said a goal is a dream with a deadline.
Exactly.
A goal is a dream with a deadline, which means if you have goals that don't have dates, they're wishes.
Exactly.
And that's where we need to be clear. So having relationship goals, we're going to take the vacations we want. We want to build up this type of financial nest egg. We want to set aside this amount of money for our child to go to college. whatever
Right.
it is. We want to be able to have a date night 3 days, 3 nights a month. This is our budget for it. It don't have to be catastrophic where you and your significant other have set aside alone time. This is money we got to set aside for the babysitter so we can pay
Right.
grandma, auntie, or cousin or somebody's daughter to watch the children while we do what we need to do. But if you don't plan for it and it's not time-based, it doesn't happen. And what ends up happening many times is, especially with mothers, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, that mothers many times, even when they're married and not married, become so wrapped up into the child that
Yes.
the things that needed to be done to sustain the relationship and the intimacy time, the sex time, the daytime, I can't have nobody else watching my child type stuff.
Yes.
Becomes a real thing. I'm not saying anybody should be watching your child, but
Right.
if you can't walk away for 3 hours
Something
to
is
make sure
wrong.
that you're to cultivate the relationship that made the kid,
That made the kid.
then something's wrong. And
Right.
if you are bringing the child into the relationship, and there's no way that the man you're pursuing can see that you can balance being a great mom and still putting the time and energy that's necessary to build a relationship, then the guy's going to go somewhere else. Why? Because energy, like water, seeks the path of
Yes.
least
Least
resistance.
resistance. And folks, we'll be right back after this commercial break, because when we get back, we're going to talk about least resistance and the difference between a bottom line and a preference. There is a big difference, folks. We'll talk about that as soon as we get back from these commercial breaks.
Already hear the bells. I'm a victim of love, calling out to heaven above for you. Don't fight it, baby. Don't fight it, baby. Baby, I'm not playing around. I mean every little word. I can't get you out of my mind. Oh baby, every curse like a new adventure, pulling me into the center closer. Yeah, baby, I'm not playing around. I mean every little word. I can't get you out of my mind. Oh baby, every curse got me going crazy. Can't control it, cannot see it all. Man.
Gaylon, I don't even know what to say. Guys, if you're watching this right now, this is a pre-recorded session. And please be sure to leave comments. Gaylon will respond to you in his next show next Wednesday. He's going to build out time at the end of the show to respond to any comments left. He wants to hear from you so he can respond. So, Gaylon, we left off. We were really transitioning over into explaining people the difference between a preference and a bottom line. And I think that when we talked about establishing an understanding, that's been so consistent. It's like you have to be clear on what you want and establishing an understanding. And I love the last example that you left off on. If you can kind of continue with that example and then transition into the difference between a preference and a bottom line, that would be great.
So, what I was trying to do with the SMART goals was just get to the space to where we understand that when you take your relationship goals through that process, it will help you receive insight about what's the healthiest and best way for your relationship to work. That's one.
Okay.
Two, when you start dealing with preferences and bottom lines, a preference is something that you would like to happen. A bottom line is something that needs to happen for you to be a functional, healthy and harmonious person in that relationship, for it to be fulfilling for you to be the best version of yourself. Preference could be, a lady saying, okay, she likes guys that are 6'3" and taller. A bottom line could be, I need, that lady could say, I need a man that that provides, that knows how to respect and honor me, that communicates with me well, does not like to that is not verbally or physically abusive. Those are bottom lines. All right. A preference could be this type of work field.
Okay.
Bottom line could be a person who knows how to manage and is satisfied and fulfilled in the work that they do.
Wow.
It's understanding the difference, because what ends up happening is we get caught up on some preferences and we're not really clear about our bottom lines. Okay. So a guy, could, say, okay, well, he has a certain type of look that he likes in a female. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a preference. And it could be, to some extent, for some guys, it's a real bottom line.
It is.
I know, people who they like particular body types,
That's a bottom line for them.
And if that woman does not have that body type, she could be a saint next to Mother Teresa. It would not matter the body type. I'm not just talking about skinny versus bigger, but hippie,
yeah,
big this, big that, whatever, athletic frame, taller, shorter. People have different frameworks for that. But some of these guys that I do know, it's a bottom line. It's not a preference.
It is.
Somebody. So you can.
I got knocked off for being too chunky.
Yeah,
I was too shapely. He likes thin women.
Yeah,
so I didn't make the cut.
Right. It's a bottom line. And here's the thing: people have to recognize if their bottom lines make sense to their well-being. Okay. So for instance, I could never date a person who smokes.
Right.
I detest cigarette smoke. I used to hide my father's cigarettes when he was a child. I detest cigarette smoke.
Yes.
That's a I could never be with somebody who abuses alcohol.
Exactly.
I could never be with someone who who does any type of drugs. I don't care what it is. Marijuana up. You couldn't be around me because I don't want that in my space.
Exactly.
I don't smoke. I don't drink. I don't do any type of drugs. That's not my space. Okay. Right. So for me, that's a bottom line. A bottom line that I'm willing to dissolve something over.
Walking out.
It can't be a bottom line if you're not willing to dissolve the relationship over it.
There you go.
You're just playing, because that means that there's no real consequences to crossing the line. Okay, and that means you always have to dissolve it, but the threat of this is a deal breaker has to be understood, and it has to be real world consequences behind it. Forgiveness does not mean reconciliation.
It doesn't.
Forgiveness does not mean I'm letting you off the hook. And forgiveness is a process of releasing so you can experience your own healing and wholeness. Forgiveness means as Gerald Jampolsky would say, means giving up all hopes for a better past. Now you can build if a person crosses a bottom line, but they need to understand that this was a bottom line. I can remember one of my spiritual fathers. I remember him telling me he was talking to a couple, and the man had a drug addiction that and then it became an issue, and then the wife basically had to put her foot down, like, if you relapse again,
I'm out.
I'm gone, and I'm taking the kids, and I'm not playing.
Right.
Okay. So when the man relapsed, she left, and she took the kids. Now he got himself clean. He got his life together. He got his wife and his children back, which most of the time does not happen.
Does not.
Okay. But he put the work in, but he had to, but for his relationship, he had to change his paradigm. What did the paradigm change? 90 meetings in 90 days with Narcotics Anonymous. Now going to the meetings at least a couple of times a week. being a sponsor, getting a sponsor that you're checking
Mhm.
in with to make sure that you're staying on top of your addiction. Make sure that you have some accountability. So he had to make her safe. What that meant was, you need to check in. You need to
Right.
be home by a certain time. You need to
Mhm.
be whatever. I'm going to ask way more questions than you might like, but you created the situation where I'm asking all of these questions.
Questions,
So you need to
exactly.
answer these questions for me to feel safe in this relationship, because you violated the integrity of the relationship over and over again. So these are the type of things I talk about when I say, do you know what you want? Do you know what your bottom lines are? Do you know what your preferences are? Because it's one thing to say it's a preference for this to happen. It's
Right.
another thing for this to be a bottom line. A bottom line without consequences is nonsense.
And with that being said, before we end this episode, I love talking to you. Is that what are the steps or processes that you can implement to help us manage our emotions in previous dating history, impacting how we view and manage relationships today? I find that a lot of people bring a lot of that energy into every relationship. And I think a lot of times we're overlooking that we need to work on ourselves. So, what can we do? Like, what steps or processes would you say we need to take in order to implement something positive in how we manage our emotions and our previous dating history that's impacting how we view or manage our current relationships?
Well, I would say, first of all, you need to go get some help. Talk to somebody like me. I do it from a spiritual, metaphysical
Hmm.
context. Go to a marriage therapist, counselor, whatever. Go get some help. That's the first thing.
Okay.
Why? Because we all have blind spots. And if
Hmm.
we do better, we do better in many cases. So getting in a space to where you can address these situations, that's one. Two, um, learn and study about forgiveness. I talked about that earlier. But you don't forgive. I never forget something that Johnny Coleman, who was my spiritual mother, a legendary minister in the United States, she deceased. She
Hmm.
would say to us, um, you don't forgive people for them, you forgive people for yourself, because nobody's worth you being sick, broke, and unhappy. She would say that all the time. So people think that forgiveness means letting somebody else off the hook. She's like, no, you just don't want to block your own blessings. So getting to the space of recognizing that forgiveness is necessary, not because of not for the other person, but you have to recognize that resentment, anger, and frustration live in your own mind and heart,
Yes.
and it interferes with the natural flow and intention of spirit working in and through your life. So when you release it, it's it's almost like a turbo boost, because you not only do you mentally and emotionally feel lighter, you will physically feel lighter, because you're not carrying around these burdens. As Erica
Hmm.
Badu used to sing about it, bag lady, you're gonna miss your bus. All right. You know,
I
she
like
like,
that, Galen. That was a nice
what she say? You
transition.
got, what was it, bag lady? You gonna miss your bus. You
Yes.
can't hurry up. You
Yeah.
got too much stuff.
You got too much stuff. She carrying them bags.
Right. So as we're walking into relationships with these
Hmm.
bags,
Yeah.
okay, and then wondering why they don't work. In other words, the more work you do on yourself on the front end, the less you healing and reconciliation work you have to do in a relationship. If you're
Yes.
already in the relationship, get the help, but also deal with forgiveness. I think that down the line, I'll just do a complete show just on forgiveness. And what does that look
Okay.
like? Because again, forgiveness does not mean letting a person off the hook. Forgiveness
Right.
is a decision for your own wholeness. And then you can decide what reconciliation looks like for you if that's what you want to do. All right.
Right.
Because a person can be deceased and you're still mad and angry at them and walking around with that pain because you don't want to forgive. And as someone once wrote many years ago, unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Because you're drinking it yourself. Folks, as we end this, I really hate to end the podcast because, the meta behind relationships is just so amazing and so impactful. But Galen, I want you to close out your show and give us, by the way, I got my sticky notes. Okay,
Yes.
everybody, to have your sticky notes or your notebook. So as we close out this episode, can you talk us through what you need us to do this week so we can gain more clarity on what we want when we're dating or in a relationship? that'll help
All
us
right.
move forward in a positive way. Guys, thank you so much for watching this episode, and be sure to remind yourself to share and follow us on all social media sites, and be sure to pay attention, men. Prostate cancer, get checked out. See you, Gaylon, next week.
I'll see you next week. So it's a few things. First thing is, I would like you to write down what you don't want in a relationship list. But only 10 things. What are the top 10? Then I want you to write your bottom lines, your non-negotiable, unalterable terms. This is what I really want in a relationship, but don't go past 10. And then write down a list of preferences. And then this is what I want you to do. I want you to then rearrange them in order of importance, and then see what occupies the top 3 in all of those 3 different categories. What it'll do is give you insight on your own personality. And then you get to ask the question, will this give me what I say I really want? Because what people say they want and what they really want can sometimes be contradictory. So this will give you the opportunity to do that. If you do this exercise, it'll give you the opportunity to discover yourself. And this can also be a thing where you can ask your partner, if you're in a relationship, what are your things you don't want in a relationship, that you don't like? What are the things that you must have, your bottom lines? What are your preferences? And make sure that you're avoiding those things you don't like. Make sure that you're enhancing the things that are the bottom lines, and see if you can give them the cherry on top of the preferences, if it works with you and your integrity. So just take a look at it and see it. 2, I want you to take a look at my seminar on YouTube called Developing Your Mind for Success. So you just put in Gaylon McDowell, Developing Your Mind for Success in YouTube. I go through a process. It's not about relationships, but it's about the mind. And anything about the mind can be related to anything. So I want you to check that out. It's within a spiritual context for those who are watching. Metaphysics, hardcore metaphysics. That's what I do. The last thing I want to ask of you is to make sure that you're liking and subscribing. We want to make sure that you are getting the notifications when the podcast comes on. We want to make sure that we're liking it, and that we're sharing it on our social media platforms. If you're watching this on Facebook, share it. If you're watching it on YouTube, text it out to people. Text it or share it on your Facebook page or your Twitter page. We want to get this information out to people, and I need you to do that. Word of mouth is the best marketing still to this day, because connection matters. So if you're getting value out of this, just share it. I'm not telling you got to coerce people into listening or watching me, but if you just post it on your social media, if you text it to some friends or email it to some people, they might get benefit from it. And if they get the benefit of it, that makes their lives better and the people that they're connected to better. And that's what we're about. We want to teach people how to live a better life, how to live a transformed life in the context of their human relationships. It does make a difference. I need you to help me make that happen. So share it, watch it, text it out to people, like it for the algorithms, all of that stuff, all of the above. And remember, if you have questions, because I realize that I'm not doing this live like the other 5S for Love shows, just because of the life of all that I have on my plate, but I really want to make sure I get this content out. Put the questions in the comment section, and I'll make sure that I put an Ask Gaylon at the end of these shows, and I will address each question that you ask. I'll say such and such, ask this question, and I'll address it directly. So you know I'm answering your question. So with that, I love you, even if I don't know you, because I know who you are. I behold the wholeness in you. And I know that you're here today, not by accident, but because something in you is drawing out of me what you need, and you are drawing me to you. The universe is always in balance, even when it doesn't seem. So let's let the harmony of the universe help us grow together. God bless you.
We know what you made of. I do better offline, get it? I've been calling to a God, I'm in tune with the signs. I'm just trying to let go, I'm just trying to be me. I ain't trying to do fine. Moon landed with the elevation, Armstrong with the levitation. My third eye needed calibration, I was heat rock when I notated, I've been going crazy. Stone face when I kill beat, leaving no trace on location, premeditated, ayy.